"Get that dog away from him!" The shout cut across the Montana fairground just as Kaiser tore free from his handler and charged through the crowd. People scattered between folding chairs and fundraiser tables, but the 7-year-old German Shepherd did not hesitate. He ran straight toward Owen Hale, stopped at the man's boots, and sat with his shoulder pressed firmly against Owen's leg. For one stunned second, the entire fire department charity event seemed to hold its breath. Owen did not move. At 41, he had learned how to survive being watched. He kept his hands visible, his posture still, and his eyes on the dog. Kaiser wore a red search and rescue harness faded from years of training. A silver patch identified the volunteer fire unit that had once been Owen's home. 3 years earlier, a grain warehouse fire had killed 2 firefighters and ended his career. The official report said Owen abandoned his assigned position when the crew needed him most. In town, the wording had become simpler. Coward. Owen now repaired tractors and irrigation pumps in a small shop outside Red Creek, speaking to customers only as long as the work required. He had come to the fair because a farmer needed a generator fixed before the evening auction. He had not expected to see Kaiser. The dog had been inside the warehouse that night. "Kaiser, heel!" Chief Nolan Briggs pushed through the crowd, gripping the loose leash. He had commanded the department during the fire and still carried himself like every order should end a discussion. Kaiser glanced at him but remained beside Owen. Nolan reached for the harness. The shepherd leaned harder against Owen's leg and lowered his head. He did not growl. He simply refused to move. Murmurs spread through the gathering. Owen saw recognition on older faces and curiosity on younger ones. Near the raffle booth stood Laura Bennett, widow of firefighter Caleb Bennett. Her expression was colder than the mountain wind moving across the field. Owen felt the familiar pressure in his chest. Caleb had been his closest friend. He had also been one of the men Owen failed to bring home. "I'm not holding him," Owen said. Nolan's jaw tightened. Then, "Step away." Owen moved 1 pace to the side. Kaiser rose immediately, followed him, and sat again. This time several people noticed the precision of it. The dog was not confused by scent or drawn to food. He was choosing a position. Owen looked down and saw Kaiser's eyes fixed on his left hand. Without thinking, Owen curled 2 fingers toward his palm, an old signal used to bring the dog close beneath smoke or falling debris. Kaiser lowered himself instantly, chest to the grass, gaze locked on Owen. Nolan's face changed. "Do not use commands on my dog." "I didn't plan to." Owen opened his hand. Kaiser rose and pressed his nose against the worn leather glove tucked into Owen's back pocket. The glove had dark burn marks across the knuckles. Owen carried it when he worked because the right glove had been lost in the warehouse. Kaiser inhaled once, then gave a low, aching whine. The sound pulled Owen backward in memory. Collapsing timber, screaming radios, and a dog trapped beneath a fallen metal rack. He had dragged Kaiser free before running toward the rear service lane. That was the moment witnesses saw him leave the crew. No one had asked why. Nolan clipped the leash onto Kaiser's harness and pulled. The dog resisted until Owen whispered, "Go!" Only then did Kaiser stand. Laura stepped forward before Nolan could leave. "Why does he listen to you?" Her voice was steady, but grief sharpened every word. Owen looked at Kaiser, then toward the fire department display where photographs of Caleb and the second fallen firefighter rested beneath 2 folded flags. "Because we were inside together," he said. Laura's eyes narrowed. "Then maybe you should finally explain why you came out alone." Owen had no answer he trusted himself to give. Kaiser turned back toward him, planted his paws, and refused Nolan's pull once more. Then the shepherd stared at Owen's burned glove and barked sharply, as though the truth was not finished with either of them. Laura's question remained between them as Nolan pulled Kaiser toward the fire department display. The shepherd followed 3 steps, stopped, and looked back at Owen. Nolan gave the leash a sharper tug. Kaiser lowered his body and refused. "He has been unsettled all morning," Nolan said to the watching crowd. "Too much noise." Owen knew better. Kaiser had worked collapsed buildings, wildfire camps, and crowded training grounds without losing focus. This was recognition, not confusion. "Let him settle," Owen said. Nolan turned on him. "You gave up the right to tell this department anything." Laura flinched, but she did not defend Owen. Her eyes remained fixed on the burned glove in his pocket. "Caleb believed in you," she said. "Right until that night." Owen felt the words land where every accusation had landed before. "I know. The report says you left the interior team without authorization." "It does. And Caleb never came out." Owen looked toward the memorial photographs. No, Laura waited for more. But Owen had spent 3 years learning that explanations sounded like excuses when the dead could not answer. Nolan led Kaiser behind a temporary barrier and ordered a young volunteer to hold him. The dog immediately pulled toward Owen again, claws digging into the grass. Owen turned away and walked toward the generator beside the auction tent. Its engine coughed, lights flickered, and the public address system died. A volunteer twisted the ignition repeatedly. "Stop," Owen said. He opened the side panel, smelled overheated insulation, and disconnected the battery before smoke could build beneath the fuel line. His hands moved without hesitation. He traced a loose cable, replaced a burned connector from his repair kit, and checked the grounding strap. Within minutes, the generator ran smoothly. People nearby watched in uneasy silence. Owen closed the panel and wiped his hands. "Do not overload the second outlet," he told the volunteer. Behind him, Kaiser barked twice. Nolan was trying to lead the dog toward a demonstration area, but Kaiser twisted free of the volunteer's grip and returned to Owen. This time, he went directly to the burned glove. He caught the cuff gently between his teeth and pulled it from Owen's pocket. "Drop it," Nolan ordered. Kaiser ignored him. Owen raised 2 fingers, then lowered his hand. The shepherd placed the glove at his feet and sat. Laura stepped closer. Her anger had not disappeared, but uncertainty had entered it. "Was that glove in the warehouse?" she asked. Owen nodded. "Kaiser was trapped under a rack near the west wall. I pulled him out." Nolan cut in quickly. "That was before Hale abandoned his assignment." Kaiser's head turned toward Nolan's voice, then back to Owen. He nudged the glove against Owen's boot and gave the same mournful whine. Laura crouched without touching it. Across the blackened leather, a narrow silver thread was caught in the seam. She recognized it first. Caleb's coat had reflective stitching like this. Owen stared down. He had never noticed the thread. Laura looked up at him. "How did it get on your glove?" Before Owen could answer, Kaiser seized the glove again and pulled toward the fire department equipment trailer, where sealed boxes from the old warehouse investigation had been placed on display. Kaiser pulled the glove toward the equipment trailer until Nolan stepped in front of him. "Those boxes are department property," the chief said. Owen did not argue. Instead, he watched the dog's posture. Kaiser was not interested in the display photographs or helmets. His nose remained fixed on a gray plastic container marked with the warehouse case number. "Open that one," Laura said. Nolan looked at her. "It contains damaged equipment. Nothing more." Then opening it changes nothing. A county fire marshal supervising the fundraiser overheard them and checked the evidence seal. The investigation had been closed, but the box was listed for public training display. After recording the access, he cut the temporary seal. Inside lay scorched radios, broken helmet lamps, lengths of hose, and a twisted section of searchdog harness. Kaiser released the glove and pushed his muzzle toward the harness. Owen recognized the torn shoulder strap he had cut to free the dog beneath the collapsed rack. A small metal mounting clip remained attached near the buckle, but whatever it once held was gone. "Kaiser wore a camera?" Owen asked. Nolan answered too quickly. "For training footage. It was destroyed." Owen lifted the strap without removing it from the box. The cut ran cleanly through 2 layers of webbing, angled downward from left to right. His own rescue knife had made that mark. Beside it, a second tear showed where something rectangular had been ripped away under force. "The mount survived," Owen said. "The camera may have separated." Nolan folded his arms. The building was searched. Kaiser pawed the trailer floor, then turned toward the fairground's west fence, pulling the glove with him. Laura followed his gaze. Beyond the fence, the abandoned grain warehouse stood half a mile away, its blackened frame awaiting demolition. "He wants to go back," she said. Before anyone could answer, the auction tent lights flickered again. The generator changed pitch, and a sharp vibration traveled through its frame. Owen moved immediately. He shut the fuel valve, killed the engine, and pulled 2 volunteers away from the side panel. A mounting bolt had worked loose, allowing the alternator housing to shift against a cable. Another minute of operation could have stripped the insulation beside the fuel line. Owen stabilized the housing with a spare bolt, rerouted the cable, and tested the load before restarting it. His movements were calm, exact, and almost silent. Laura watched him check the fire extinguisher before allowing the crowd near the tent again. "You saw that before anyone else," she said. "Machines warn you," Owen replied. "You just have to stop pretending the noise is normal." The words seemed to affect her, though he had not meant them as a confession. Kaiser returned to the gray box and touched the burned glove with his nose. Then he looked from Owen to the warehouse and gave one deliberate bark. The fire marshal examined the inventory sheet. "There is no camera listed," he said. "Only the harness." Nolan's face tightened. Because there was nothing to recover. Owen studied the missing mount, the silver thread caught in his glove, and the dog who remembered a route no report had explained. "Then we should find out why Kaiser thinks otherwise." The fire marshal refused to let anyone enter the warehouse until the site owner approved a safety inspection. Nolan supported the decision immediately. "The building is unstable, and this fundraiser is not an investigation," he said. Laura looked toward the blackened structure beyond the fence. "Then why was damaged equipment brought here for display before demolition?" Nolan's mouth tightened. Before he could answer, someone shouted from the auction tent. A portable heater had tipped against a canvas wall, and smoke curled beneath the roof. Parents began pulling children toward the narrow exit, creating a crush at the opening. Owen moved before the volunteers understood the danger. "Kill the power and open both side panels," he ordered. He crossed the tent low, avoiding the thickest smoke, and reached 2 children frozen behind a table. Kaiser slipped beneath the barrier and followed. The shepherd barked once, then pushed through a loose side flap, creating a clear path away from the crowd. Owen guided the children after him, keeping one hand on each shoulder until Laura met them outside. "Take them 20 yards upwind," he said. He returned only long enough to drag the heater clear with a folding chair while a volunteer used an extinguisher on the burning fabric. The smoke stopped within seconds. No one was hurt, but the tent wall was ruined and several people were shaken. Nolan arrived after the danger had passed. "You should have waited for my crew," he said. Owen looked at the children coughing lightly beside Laura. There was no time. That kind of judgment is what got people killed before. The accusation struck harder in public, yet Owen did not defend himself. He checked the heater cord, found a crushed section beneath a table leg, and handed it to the marshal. "The breaker failed to trip. Shut down the circuit until it is tested." Laura had heard everything. She walked back with the children's mother, who thanked Owen through tears. When they left, Laura faced Nolan. He moved toward the smoke. "Today was not the warehouse." "No," she said. "Today I saw it myself." Kaiser came to Owen carrying the burned glove, which he had retrieved from the trailer. He placed it beside Owen's boot, then sat between him and the chief. Laura crouched and examined the silver thread again. "Caleb told me before that fire that the rear hydrant valve had been sticking," she said. "He complained the pressure dropped during drills." Nolan's expression changed. "That was repaired, was it?" Laura asked. The marshal turned toward him. "The report says Hale abandoned the interior line near the west wall." "Where was the auxiliary valve?" Nolan glanced at the warehouse. "Rear service lane." Owen finally spoke. "Beyond the west wall." The pieces did not prove anything yet, but Laura's anger had shifted direction. She looked at Owen as if seeing the space between the report and the truth for the first time. Kaiser rose and pulled toward the fence again. This time Laura picked up the burned glove and followed. "Get the inspection order," she told the marshal. "If that camera is still there, we find it before the building comes down." The inspection order arrived near sunset, allowing only the fire marshal, Owen, Laura, and 2 structural technicians inside the fenced warehouse perimeter. Nolan remained outside with Kaiser's leash, insisting the dog had no place in an unstable building. Kaiser refused to follow him. He planted his paws beside Owen until the marshal allowed the shepherd to enter on a short line. The warehouse smelled of wet ash and old grain. Steel braces supported sections of the roof, while painted markers identified areas safe enough for limited access. Owen moved carefully along the former west wall, reading scorch patterns and collapsed shelving. The report claimed he had left the interior crew from this position. Kaiser sniffed the burned glove, then pulled toward a narrow aisle buried beneath warped boards. "That was not the route to the rear valve," Nolan called from outside. Owen stopped. For 3 years, he had pictured himself running directly away from Caleb and the hose team. Kaiser's path angled deeper along the wall before turning toward the service lane. "It was the route around the collapse," Owen said. A fallen conveyor had blocked the direct exit that night. He remembered cutting Kaiser free, hearing the water pressure fail, and choosing the only passage still open. The dog tugged harder. One technician lifted the first board while Owen cleared loose debris by hand. Beneath the 3rd plank, Kaiser began scratching at compacted ash. Laura knelt several feet back, holding the burned glove. "He smells something." Owen used a small brush to expose a strip of red webbing attached to a cracked metal housing. It was the missing camera strap. The device had been driven beneath the boards when the rack collapsed, not carried away or destroyed in the fire. Kaiser whined and pressed his nose near the housing until Owen gave the close signal. The shepherd lay down beside him immediately. The marshal photographed the find before lifting it into an evidence container. Nolan entered the marked safe zone despite being told to wait. "Heat and impact would have ruined everything," he said. "Finding hardware proves nothing." "It proves the camera was never accounted for," Laura replied. Owen stared at the spot where Kaiser had found it. Until that moment, he had believed the dog chose him at the fair because of an old scent and a familiar command. Now he understood Kaiser had been leading him through the sequence of that night. The trapped dog, the blocked aisle, the lost camera, and the route toward the auxiliary valve. The shepherd was not simply remembering Owen. He was retracing what Owen had done. The midpoint of the old story shifted beneath him. He had not abandoned his assigned position before the collapse. The collapse had changed the position, and he had moved through it for a reason. A technician examined the camera housing through the evidence bag. "The memory module is sealed separately," she said. "Damaged, but possibly recoverable." Nolan looked toward the ruined west wall. His certainty had disappeared. Kaiser rose and faced the rear service lane, where a rusted valve will remain visible beyond the debris. Then he gave one deliberate bark. Owen followed his gaze. If the camera had recorded even a few minutes, it might show why he left the crew, and what happened before he tried to return. The camera went to a regional forensic lab, where technicians warned that heat damage might make recovery impossible. Owen returned to his repair shop with Kaiser, but the discovery changed how people entered the room. Some avoided his eyes. Others asked careful questions they should have asked 3 years earlier. Nolan said nothing publicly. Laura, however, brought a copy of Caleb's old equipment notes. One page mentioned repeated pressure loss at the auxiliary valve and a request for replacement parts that had never been approved. "Caleb kept this at home," she said. "I thought it was routine paperwork." Owen studied the dates. The final request had been filed 4 days before the warehouse fire. Nolan knew the valve could fail. "Knowing there was a problem is not the same as knowing what would happen," Laura replied. Her fairness surprised him. She still carried anger, but she would not turn grief into an accusation without proof. The fire marshal arranged a controlled site review before demolition. Owen, Kaiser, and 2 investigators retraced the west wall route. The shepherd followed the burned gloves sent through the collapsed aisle, paused where the camera had been found, then continued toward the rear service lane. At the rusted valve, Kaiser sat and looked at Owen's left hand. Owen gave the old close signal. A memory returned with painful clarity. Kaiser trapped under the rack, the hose line going soft, Caleb shouting that pressure was gone, and Owen cutting the harness before ordering the dog to follow. Owen had reached the valve, forced the jammed will open with a steel bar, and restored water to the lines protecting 3 nearby homes. Then he had turned back toward the warehouse. The official timeline listed none of it. The marshal examined the valve housing and found deep tool marks beneath the corrosion. Their angle matched the pry bar Owen described. "This does not prove who made them," he said, "but they are consistent with an emergency opening." Nolan arrived during the review and stood outside the marked zone. He finally admitted the department had been under pressure after 2 failed inspections and threatened funding cuts. If the valve defect became part of the fatality report, he feared the volunteer unit would be dissolved, leaving the county without nearby fire coverage. "I thought protecting the department protected everyone," he said. "So you simplified the report," Owen replied. Nolan looked toward the warehouse. "I reported what witnesses saw. You left the interior position. By the time you returned, the roof had fallen." His voice carried shame rather than defiance. He had not invented Owen's movement, but he had removed the reason for it because the reason exposed his own ignored warnings. Before anyone answered, the forensic lab called. The memory module had yielded 11 seconds of damaged video and a longer fragment of audio. The image showed smoke, Kaiser's harness, and Owen moving toward the rear lane. The audio contained Caleb's voice shouting over the alarm. Most words were distorted, but one sentence was clear. "Owen, get that valve open." Kaiser lifted his head at Caleb's voice and pressed against Owen's leg. The evidence was not complete, but the old report had begun to break apart. The recovered audio should have been enough to lift some of the weight from Owen's shoulders, but it did the opposite. Caleb's voice proved he had been ordered to open the valve, yet the video still ended before Owen returned to the warehouse. The missing minutes remained large enough for doubt. Nolan's report had shaped 3 years of memory, and Owen had begun to fear that even the truth would arrive incomplete. At the repair shop, he played the 11-second clip again. Kaiser lay beside the workbench, ears lifting at Caleb's voice before flattening at the sound of the alarm. Each replay made the dog more restless. By the 4th, Kaiser stood, paced to the door and gave a low whine. Owen shut off the recording. "Enough!" The shepherd returned slowly but did not settle. He placed one paw on the burned glove and watched Owen with the same steady attention he had shown at the fair. Owen looked away. "You found the camera. You showed them the route. Maybe that is all there is." Kaiser picked up the glove and carried it toward the front door. Owen did not follow. For the first time since the fair, the dog dropped it and lay down with his back toward him. The rejection was quiet, but it hurt. Owen had spent years believing everyone else had abandoned him. Now he saw how often he had abandoned the chance to be heard. He closed the shop early and drove Kaiser to Laura's house. She answered holding Caleb's equipment notes. When she saw the glove in the dog's mouth, her expression tightened. "I do not know what else you expect me to find." Owen almost apologized and left. Then Kaiser walked past him, sat in front of Laura, and placed the glove at her feet. The silver thread caught the porch light. Laura stared at it for several seconds before going inside. She returned with a small plastic storage box. "Caleb recorded radio traffic during major calls," she said. "He said the department system sometimes lost transmissions. I could never listen after the funeral." Inside was an old handheld recorder with a date written on masking tape. The battery was dead, but Owen recognized the model and replaced it from his service kit. Laura pressed play. Static filled the porch, followed by overlapping voices from the warehouse fire. Caleb reported low pressure. Nolan ordered the interior team to hold position. Then Caleb shouted that the auxiliary valve had failed again. Owen's own voice answered that he was going around the west collapse. Nolan came over the channel, telling him to wait. Caleb cut in immediately. "No time. Let him go. We lose those houses if the line dies." The recording continued. Minutes later, Owen called that the valve was open and he was returning. No one answered. The roof alarm sounded before the file ended. Laura covered her mouth. Owen felt no victory, only the return of the moment he had spent 3 years trying not to remember. He had gone back. He had been too late. Kaiser leaned against his leg, trembling at the voices but refusing to move away. Laura picked up the burned glove and pressed the silver thread between her fingers. "Caleb knew why you left," she said. Owen looked at the dog beside him. The lowest point was not being called a coward. It was realizing Caleb had trusted him to act, while Owen had spent years trusting the accusation instead. Laura gave the recorder to the fire marshal the next morning. Investigators compared its timestamps with dispatch logs, the recovered camera fragment, and the original incident report. The sequence finally became clear. When the interior hose lost pressure, Caleb warned that 3 homes behind the warehouse were exposed to spreading fire. Owen freed Kaiser from the fallen rack, moved around the blocked west aisle, and forced open the defective auxiliary valve. The restored water reached both the interior line and the crews protecting the neighborhood. Owen then returned toward the warehouse, but the roof collapsed before he could reach Caleb and the second firefighter. The camera's damaged video showed his path toward the valve. Caleb's private recording supplied the orders and Owen's call that he was coming back. The marks on the valve confirmed someone had opened it with a tool during the fire. Kaiser connected every physical piece by retracing the same route and identifying the equipment he had worn that night. At a formal review, Nolan admitted removing the valve failure and Caleb's authorization from his written summary. He had feared that ignored maintenance requests would dissolve the department and leave the county without local protection. His decision had protected the institution by sacrificing Owen's name. "I told myself the report was technically true," Nolan said. "You left the interior position. I left out why." Owen sat beside Laura, with Kaiser resting between their chairs. He expected anger when she turned toward him. Instead, she placed Caleb's recorder on the table. "My husband trusted you to save those homes," she said. "Then he trusted you to come back." Her voice broke, but she continued. "You did both." Owen looked down at the burned glove. The silver thread had come from Caleb's coat when Owen grabbed his shoulder near the west wall before leaving for the valve. It was not evidence that Owen abandoned him. It was evidence that they had still been together when Caleb told him to go. The review board cleared Owen of cowardice and unauthorized abandonment. It recommended correcting the official report and opening a separate inquiry into neglected equipment and incomplete documentation. Nolan accepted suspension pending that process. He did not ask for forgiveness. He only faced Owen and said, "I should have told the whole truth when it mattered." Owen answered, quietly, "Yes." Outside the meeting room, several firefighters approached, uncertain what words could repair 3 years. Owen did not need speeches. The corrected record would matter more. Laura knelt beside Kaiser and touched the side of his harness. "You kept choosing him because you remembered what he did." Kaiser looked at Owen's left hand. Owen gave the 2-finger close signal, and the shepherd crossed the hallway to sit against his leg. This time, no one tried to pull him away. The dog's choice had never been a judgment delivered without reason. It was loyalty grounded in smoke, scent, command, and the memory of the man who had carried him from wreckage before running toward the failing valve. The truth was finally visible, but Owen still had to decide what to do with the life waiting beyond it. The official report was amended 3 weeks later. It no longer described Owen as a firefighter who abandoned his interior position without cause. It stated that he left the West Wall team under emergency conditions to restore a failed water supply, protected 3 nearby homes, and attempted to return before the roof collapse. Caleb's authorization, the recovered camera footage, the valve marks, and the radio recording were added to the permanent record. The word coward never appeared in the original report, but it had lived in every omission. Correcting the facts finally removed the place where that word had grown. Nolan resigned as chief before the department completed its disciplinary review. He accepted responsibility for suppressing the maintenance failure and presenting Owen's movement without its purpose. The volunteer unit remained active under temporary leadership while the county ordered equipment inspections and new reporting procedures. Owen took no satisfaction in Nolan's fall. The man had made a fearful choice to protect a department he believed the community needed. That choice still demanded consequences, but Owen understood how easily fear could disguise itself as duty. Laura visited his repair shop carrying Caleb's framed photograph and the burned glove. "I spent 3 years believing you left him," she said. "I am sorry." Owen looked at the silver thread still caught in the blackened seam. "I spent 3 years believing I had no right to explain." Laura placed the photograph beside the glove. "Caleb knew you went back." Owen nodded. That truth hurt, but it no longer crushed him. He could not change the roof collapse or the seconds separating rescue from loss. He could stop treating survival as evidence of failure. Kaiser had been transferred out of active search work after the warehouse review. At 7, he remained healthy, but repeated stress around fire alarms made retirement the responsible choice. The department asked Laura to help decide where he should live. She arrived at Owen's shop one morning with Kaiser on a red leash. The shepherd saw Owen, pulled forward, and sat against his leg exactly as he had at the fair. "It seems he already decided," Laura said. Owen rested a hand on Kaiser's harness. "Only if the department agrees." "They do." Kaiser looked toward Owen's left hand. Owen gave the 2-finger close signal, and the dog leaned into him with a quiet certainty that required no applause. Their reunion did not erase what happened. It gave both survivors somewhere honest to carry it. Owen did not return to full-time firefighting. Instead, he accepted an invitation to help the volunteer unit rebuild its safety training. He taught equipment checks, emergency water planning, and the importance of recording why decisions were made, not merely where people moved. Laura attended the first session and placed Caleb's recorder on the table as a reminder that complete truth could protect both the living and the dead. Kaiser joined supervised demonstrations, showing volunteers how trained dogs followed scent, commands, and familiar routes. Owen never described the shepherd as capable of judging a man's soul. Kaiser had chosen him because he remembered smoke, leather, the close signal, and the hands that cut him free. Yet that memory accomplished what people had failed to do. It forced the community to look again. At the next autumn fundraiser, Owen repaired the generator before the gates opened. No one announced his arrival. No crowd offered a dramatic apology. People simply greeted him, asked about Kaiser, and made room beside the department tent. Laura hung Caleb's photograph among the memorial display, then placed a second image nearby, Owen and Kaiser working together during a safety drill. As evening sunlight crossed the Montana field, Kaiser walked through the gathering without hesitation. He passed Nolan's empty command chair, the equipment trailer, and the place where he had first broken free. Then he returned to Owen and sat at his side. Owen looked down at the dog who had carried the truth longer than anyone understood. This time, when the town watched them, he did not lower his eyes. He gave the quiet hand signal, and together they walked toward the training field, their shadows stretching ahead across the golden grass.